Here we are back together again, friends, for another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Erika is back for part 3 of the Caregiver Burnout series, and don't forget, if you'd like to hire Erika, you can learn more about her at erikaforsyth.com. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. If you are the caregiver of someone with type 1 diabetes or have type 1 yourself, please go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and complete the survey. This should take you about 10 minutes and will really help type 1 diabetes research. You can help right from your house at t1dexchange.org/juicebox. I know that Facebook has a bad reputation, but please give the private Facebook group for the Juicebox Podcast a healthy once-over. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by AG1. I start every day with a delicious drink of AG1. You could as well. Drink AG1.com/juicebox. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Omnipod and the Omnipod 5. Learn more and get started today at omnipod.com/juicebox. And that Omnipod iPhone app you've been waiting for, it's available right now in the Apple App Store. Erika, we are going to jump into episode 3, the third part of our Caregiver Burnout series. Today, we're going to talk about what?
That's right. Today, we are going to talk about the third burden or barrier to why it's challenging to take care of yourself as a caregiver or find time to care for yourself. And that is managing type 1 and the experience of nighttime sleep disturbances. Again, this is the third most common burden or issue that parents have identified in all of the research around caregiver burden for children with type 1.
When it's time, can I read the quote from the research?
Yes, I'm going to pass it over. It's time. Read the quote. This is from the parent from the research.
All right, hold on. Let me I'm going to get into character. Let's see. I'm sad and tired. Okay, I got it.
Yes.
I feel unhappy when I think about not sleeping, feeling anxious and feeling tired and moody all the time. So it's rather contradictory because I am obviously satisfied that things are well and that my child feels fine. At the same time, I may not feel satisfied because I do not feel well, really. Okay. So what this person is saying is, right, like I got my ducks in a row here. Kid's doing good, but I'm up at 3 a.m, bolusing a 140, and I feel like I'm going to drop dead because unbroken sleep might be the worst thing that could happen to you. I used to think, I guess in the beginning when Arden was first diagnosed and I realized, I'm awake at 2 a.m. for 45 minutes and then I'm up again at 4:30 for 15 minutes. I actually, in the beginning, I thought, I can do this. It's okay. I guess this is what it is. And then as the years went on, I mean, there were times like one time I woke my wife up and I said, I need you to watch Arden's blood sugar. I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. I was buzzing. And my heart was like thumping out of my chest. I was exhausted, but I had so much adrenaline. It didn't matter. I was awake. And I'm not that guy. I am head on the pillow, go to sleep. Like I do not struggle to sleep. Prior to Arden's diabetes, I would not have been a person who I thought could have just woken up at 2 a.m. and stayed awake for 45 minutes or an hour or something like that. I just wasn't that person. But then I was, and I actually tricked myself for a long time into thinking, well, I'm going to be okay. This will be all right. I guess this is how I live and I'll be okay. And then one day I thought, I'm going to die if I don't fix this,
Yes.
And then CGMs and algorithms came and it got easier. But tell me more about it, please.
Yes. I mean, that tension between, you need to sleep, but just as important, you wanting to make sure your child stays alive and or doesn't have a low or stay high for hours. And so this is obviously this state of sleep deprivation is really common in the beginning of diagnosis. And as we've talked about, the seasons of change, particularly from, if you're changing devices or growth hormones, et cetera, et cetera. So this, the fear, this is probably one of the greatest fears among parents, at least according to the research. But I would also probably say from what we hear on the podcast and in my office, this is the greatest feared outcome is your child having a hypoglycemic reaction or a seizure. And so then that fear is driving you're just wanting to monitor whether you're finger pricking every half an hour to an hour or watching the CGM. And so even as you just said, parents know and experience that, you have short tempers over long periods of time of not sleeping. You are not motivated to exercise. You have difficulty making decisions. You might have some impairment in your work performance or functioning. You might not make the dietary choices that you are striving for. You have decreased patience and irritability. So you're then stuck in between this tension of, I so desperately want my child to be safe at night, and I so desperately need to sleep. And I know that I'm not functioning well.
Yeah.
But yet, as the parent says, but then you feel well because your child's doing okay at night, right?
Yeah, you're proud and exhausted at the same time. And
yes,
it's funny because you said hypoglycemia is what people are worried about in the research. I was worried about both. Like, that's the other thing. Like, I'm freaked out when somebody says, oh, I needed to sleep through the night, so we just put their blood sugar at, 180 and left it there all night, or 200 or wherever you put it. I'm like, oh God, like, don't do that. Don't do the other thing either. Like, to me, that's the push and the pull and the anxiety of the whole thing, which is like, you can't be low. That's dangerous right now. And I don't want you to be high because that's dangerous later. And, I'm exhausted, but in my mind, if I go to sleep now and don't do something about this, either you're going to have a seizure or your eyes are going to explode when you're 35. And that's how it feels. Like, it feels like no matter, like, I have to do the right thing to avoid both sides of this, storm. And, and the middle feels so narrow, like the line you're trying to walk, it feels like a tightrope. Right. And it's not easy. And then you're exhausted, and everything you just said about what comes with exhaustion, I know I've lived through all that. Just everything you just said happened to me. And it's, I don't think it's a thing you can avoid. All those implications.
Yes. Yeah. So it is challenging, and again, can be normal during certain, ages and stages of your child's diagnosis. But what we're wanting to encourage you to think about, if this is now becoming years and years and years, right, of not being able to sleep. And so pausing and asking yourself, noticing the why, what is going on? And so as we move into kind of the tool, I say take breaks, and we're going to get into that. Like, what does that actually mean? But I would encourage you to start asking yourself, what is the risk and the benefit of studying the numbers? What is the underlying reason that you cannot sleep? And this might feel a little bit similar to episode 2 of kind of pausing and listening to what is driving the behavior. Is it fear? Yes, it's probably fear of your child being too high for too long or having a low. But what is underneath that? Do you need more education? Do you need more knowledge? Do you need more time? Do you need more trust with the alarms? And we'll get into that a little bit more. So what is it kind of general anxiety? Are you feeling anxious about everything and that's keeping you up? And then you're watching the numbers. So just trying to understand what is it? It might be grief also, in the beginning or at any point. What is it that is driving you to continue to monitor the lows beyond the obvious of what we've already said?
Right. Guilt, maybe. My daughter is 20 years old. I can't even believe it. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 2, and she put her first insulin pump on when she was 4. That insulin pump was an Omnipod, and it's been an Omnipod every day since then. That's 16 straight years of wearing Omnipod. It's been a friend to us, and I believe it could be a friend to you. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Whether you get the Omnipod DASH or the automation that's available with the Omnipod 5, you are going to enjoy tubeless insulin pumping. You're going to be able to jump into a shower or a pool or a bathtub without taking off your pump. That's right, you will not have to disconnect to bathe with an Omnipod. You also won't have to disconnect to play a sport or to do anything where a regular tube pump has to come off. Arden has been wearing an Omnipod for 16 years. She knows other people that wear different pumps, and she has never once asked the question, should I be trying a different pump? Never once. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Get a pump that you'll be happy with forever. The holiday season is approaching quickly, and I'd like to take something off of your plate. If you're looking for something for a partner, a parent, or a friend, why not give them the gift of health? Give them AG1. And right now, AG1 is running a special Black Friday offer for all of November. AG1 is a daily health drink packed with nutrition to help alleviate bloating, support sustained energy, and whole body health. It's the time of year where we put a lot of different stuff in our bellies, but the one thing we should put in there, my opinion, is AG1. So this holiday season, try AG1 for yourself or even gift it to someone special. It's the perfect time to focus on supporting your body with an easy and surprisingly delicious daily health drink. And that's why I've been partnering with AG1 for so long. Every week of November, AG1 will be running a special Black Friday offer for a free gift with your first subscription, in addition to the welcome kit and vitamin D3K2. So make sure to check out drinkag1.com/juicebox to see what gift you can get this week. That's drinkag1.com/juicebox to start your holiday season off on a healthier note while supplies last.
Yes.
Right? That could get you. It's my fault. This comes from my side of the family, that kind of feeling. I think also either being a single parent or having a spouse who you guys have decided that, well, they work during the day, so I'm the one that does this. Or, I have to be honest, I hear a lot of people tell me, I guess it could be either side of it, but I hear a lot of women tell me like, oh, my husband says he's not good at hearing things. I'm like, oh, yeah, me either. But let's go. Like, so sometimes I think in a 2-spouse situation, you'll find one that just goes, oh, I'm not good at this. And then, it gets laid on you. Or you're the one that does the management, so it feels like you're the one that needs to be doing it. And, people can kind of use that as either like a legitimate reason or a cop-out for not being involved overnight. Yeah, but at the same time, I don't know. I think you could to me, it seems like a learning thing. Like very much like we talked about before. Like if you had good tools, not just CGMs and pumps, which, would obviously make it easier, I think. But just like good knowledge of how insulin works and, how to head things off before they become giant, hyperglycemia issues or hypo. I think those tools will help you. And then maybe you start with a wider range that you're okay with overnight and then learn how to, through actions that happen prior to sleeping, settings and bolusing strategies, etc., learn to like tighten that tolerance as you go. I wish I could go back into it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any of that information, but I can see where it would have saved me to do those things. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's trusting, can you trust if you are using CGMs, can you trust the alarms, as you were saying, right? Like, and if you can't, what is underneath that? Is that general anxiety? Is it not trusting? Or is it too tight? Is it too wide? What is your range?
Also, the physical alarm, like maybe some people just don't hear it. Like I know that I just kind of was sarcastic about it but sometimes you just don't hear it. Alarm fatigue is very real. There's a ton of research about it. I don't hear the damn thing like half the time. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'll hear the dun, 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 like the real low one, but I don't hear the other stuff. And we actually just realized recently that my wife's phone, her high alarm, like it's set where ours is, but she's not really my wife's not involved in like moment to moment decisions about insulin. So I said to her, like, let's raise that alarm up so that if Arden goes over 120, your phone's not beeping every few minutes. I said, because I think we're just hearing it now and not reacting to it anymore. Like, let's put it at a place where if it goes off, it wakes us up because we're not accustomed to hearing it. And even though we're sleeping through it, I still think it's causing poor sleep for us as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alarm fatigue, not hearing it. I mean, I think I've shared this before. I don't necessarily hear my alarms, but my husband will, but I will feel the vibration. Mm-hmm. My pump will vibrate. And so I often will feel that wherever it is, in my bed. Mm-hmm. But there are certainly more, sugar, all the different, Sugar Pixel,
Glucose isn't
the... Thank you, Glucose.
Glucose isn't audible. It's visual, but I find it... Okay, so you want to go over these real quick?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sugar Pixel has a puck. Actually, I have it right here. That's crazy. A puck that plugs into the Sugar Pixel, and then it vibrates. So you can kind of put it under your pillow, right? And hopefully that'll give you some vibration there. I like Glucose because I set ranges for colors. And then if I should wake up in the middle of the night and I look up and there's a soft green glow in the corner, I don't have to open my phone and look at it because I think, okay, green, good, back to sleep. Red, oh, I got to wake up and see. And it helps you it helps me at least, to stay aligned with what I'm trying to accomplish without it yanking me hard out of sleep. Now, it
does. That is cool.
Yeah, it definitely helps with that. Also, if you get too low, if the blood sugar gets too low, it flashes red. Now, visually, I've never been woken by that because I have it on it's as dim as I can get it. I use it for just it makes my wall glow a color off in a corner, and that's how I use it. But the Sugar Pixel itself, that has alarms, and you could set it up to vibrate for yourself. I think it's a great tool. I have a Sugar Pixel next to my bed. Mm-hmm. Arden doesn't have it because she's at college and she couldn't get it onto the to the Wi-Fi, because her school's Wi-Fi was blocking it. But I also know there are people who can get around that. Yeah, it's a weird monster. The data's so valuable and the alarms are so valuable until one day you just I don't hear this anymore, and that's the end. Now,
yes.
What about the other side of it? If my daughter's low, my wife's cortisol shoots through the roof and she can't go back to sleep. It hits her. She gets hit with adrenaline. Even if I'm she's fine. She's oh, it don't matter. I'm up. So does that happen to people too, I guess, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think with your different ages of your child, we have, yes, thank goodness we have all this technology if you're able to use it, and the alarms, but also your body. For most, not actually, I don't know what the stats are. I wonder if you do, of how many people can wake up from their lows. Because prior to my wearing a CGM, my body would wake itself up from a low. Now it doesn't, because now I'm reliant on my alarms if I go low. So I will not wake up and feel low prior to my alarm going off. But before I had alarms, my body would wake itself up. My brother would never wake up from a low, and consequently had some more morning seizures.
Okay.
So I wonder, I don't know, I've never actually thought through this, but I wonder if our bodies have become more dependent on the alarms as opposed to waking themselves up from lows. I don't know.
You can also get hypoglycemic unawareness, and that
can, yes.
Which can come from that. It described to me when your body used to wake you up, what did it feel like? Do you remember the visceral feeling?
Yeah, oh yes. It was pretty classic, shaky, racing heart. Those would be the first. I would wake up and feel shaky.
Wake you up, physically pop you open, or when you're dreaming and you realize in your dream you I got to pee, and then you wake up because you got to pee, that kind of. How does it work? How did it work?
The shaking wouldn't wake me up, but not like I was seizing, but I would wake up feeling that way, feeling shaky, and would just roll over and pop some glucose in my mouth.
Did you stay awake to see if it worked?
No, I would take 3 and go back to bed. Yeah. I probably wouldn't even finger prick. Yeah. That was back in the day of take 3 and you're good. Yeah. Tabs.
3 should be it. Boom. Done. Now, did you wake up in the morning super high, or was it usually okay?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll fix this by making my blood sugar 350. But at a certain age, right, in college maybe, it's just great that you did it, honestly. Now, but you say now as an adult, your husband's the one that wakes you.
He'll hear the alarms. And think, due to technology, I don't have as many nighttime alarm or lows, right? Because the pump will shut off. But if I do have a low, I would say most often I'll hear or feel the vibrate or the alarm and wake up and then feel low.
How often does that happen to you in a month?
A nighttime low, maybe twice.
Okay.
And that only happens if I've eaten late and I have a lot of insulin on board before going to bed.
Yeah.
And so that just means I over bolused. But if everything is okay and I naturally go low, my pump will shut off and I'll never.
You wake up in the morning and say, I was 65 for an hour and it came back up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. So I'm sorry, back to the reason we're here.
Where are we?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So, I mean, nighttime, what is driving that fear, right? Beyond the normal? Is it fear, anxiety? Is it guilt? Is it shame? We've talked about what gremlins, what thoughts are you having as you're watching the arrows? Are you on that roller coaster of fear, of shame, anxiety as you watch your child's numbers rise and fall? Mm-hmm. So what do? I know a lot of people, particularly in the beginning, and I understand and get it and validate it, but you might spend all day watching the numbers.
Staring at it, yeah.
And then even if you're in, range and you feel like you're in a comfortable space, it's hard. You can't tell your mind to say, oh, it's nighttime, I'm going to stop looking at the numbers. Right? It's hard to make that switch. So if you're reliant and dependent and accustomed to staring at the numbers for most of the day, it's hard to just turn that off at night. Mm-hmm. And so one tool to take an actual break during the day, for example, not looking at your, and this is again, mostly we're talking to people who are, doing follow or watching your child's number on a CGM app. Not look at it for starting with 5 minutes. If you're looking at it, or if it's constantly up in your screen, again, if you are able to function and you feel comfortable and everything is flowing, that's great. Mm-hmm. But if you are finding that you are riddled with fear and shame and guilt and need to feel like you're fixated on the number and want to take a break, this is something that you could try to say, okay, I'm not going to look at the number for 5 minutes. And increase to 10 or an hour, whatever feels like, wherever you are in that threshold, it feels like a challenge initially and then grow.
Yeah.
And during that time, that will give you clues as to what's going on. Are you panicked? Are you fearful? Are you able to distract yourself and trust what's going on with where your child's number is and how much insulin is on board, et cetera? Mm-hmm. And so during that initial time, it might be hard to be like, what else can I do? Whether it's make a phone call, do something positive for yourself, any kind of distraction that is helpful. But noticing in those breaks of when you're not looking at the CGM or the number, that is an indicator of what is going on inside you emotionally. Does that make sense?
It does. This is not a left turn, I promise you.
No, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Occurs to me while we're talking, right? How do social media platforms keep your attention? Through dopamine hits for instant gratification. Dopamine has another name. It could be adrenaline. Mm-hmm. So it gives you a social validation loop. It's another thing that social media does to keep you, and you're validating that you're doing something important. It gives you that feeling of completeness, that you've completed something. People love that. Mm-hmm. It hits you with FOMO, right? So the fear of missing out on something. There's something called notification triggers. So push notifications come, it draws you back into the app. It makes you feel like there's something interesting happening, like this whole thing. There's an engagement loop that comes from that. And then there's social comparison, which you talked about earlier. And then there's the kind of the gamification element that they use. They gamify things. So you could make an argument that I've heard people say that they game their diabetes and they do well because of it, because they take it as like, oh, I'm trying to keep, like, it's, I don't know, it's like Pac-Man. Like, I'm trying to keep the lady inside of the thing without the ghost catching her. Like, I'm trying to keep my numbers here and there. Some people report that that's a really great way for them, not for everybody. And also you get a lot of emotions out of this too. So it occurs to me that, like, there are a number of reasons why that could help you do well, but there's even more reasons why it could hurt you. But at the same time, we're right back to the idea of, like, you can't just put it down. It's not a game. It's life and it's health. But there's a bunch of ways that you could be being impacted by it and not realize it, and therefore keep you in that app longer than you need to be, which is why I very just simply tell people, you set alarms and you do not look at that app unless those alarms are beeping. Just do not. You got to trust something. You got to trust that if I'm in the range that I set, I don't need to look. That's my opinion. That's what worked best for me.
Yes. If that doesn't work for you, that's okay. And if you're noticing that whatever you're doing doesn't feel sustainable, that's, then to kind of pause and say, okay, why can't I trust the alarms?
Yeah.
Why can't I sleep? If the fear, and I get it, I really do, that the fear, you don't want your child to have a low or sustained highs. And then looking at where is that fear coming from? And again, I think I've said this every episode now, but that it does often feel like a luxury, something that takes time and energy to pause and be like, well, what is driving my fear? Yeah. I don't have time to think about that. I'm just surviving. I'm just trying to keep my child alive. And so I think I want to acknowledge that too, that this, hopefully just even by listening again to this particular episode, that you're able to spend a few minutes saying like, well, why is that so hard beyond the obvious of wanting to keep my child alive?
Right. Well, I'll talk too about the ranges, because I think this is important. At some point in the podcast, you'll hear me say that it occurred to me while I was still learning all this. It occurred to me one day that Arden's top number was set at 200 on her CGM, and that we were very good at keeping her blood sugar under 200. And then I thought, I wonder if this is an expectation game. So I pushed her blood sugar to 180. And then I realized we were awfully good at keeping her blood sugar under 180. And I was like, oh, so I kept pushing it down, right? What you don't realize in that story is that along the way, I learned other things that were helping us keep her at 180, 160, 140, like on and on and on. And it's a lot about settings and timing and the other stuff we talk about in the podcast about how to use insulin. But as I was learning to use insulin and tightening the range up, I was getting what I was expecting more often. It just occurred to me while you were talking, I don't know what Arden's blood sugar is. I don't think I've looked at it today. So I wasn't certain. So I opened up my phone and her blood sugar is 88. But that freedom of like, the settings are good. We know how to use the insulin. Most of the time, this is going to be okay. Like, the way to get to that is by understanding how insulin works. This is, again, my opinion. And so if there's a place to put your effort, to me, it's learning what we talked about, like your body. It's, like what it needs, like what happens, like how do I get ahead of this? Knowing simple things about insulin. I know this isn't like an insulin, series, but the one thing that I think most people miss out on in the beginning is that what's happening now is about what you did before. And I don't think people think about it that way usually. Like you mentioned it earlier, like if I get low overnight, it could be because I had a heavy dinner some 6 hours previous to that, And I don't think that in the beginning it occurs to you. Like, I think you just look at it and you go, it's 3 a.m. Why did I get low at 3 a.m? And you start making changes to your basal and messing up your basal and everything else. Right? So that's the stuff. It's where I just think go listen to the Pro Tip series, learn how to use your insulin, and then see if a lot of these things don't get alleviated over time. Is my expectation for you. It's why I made the Pro Tip series, actually. I can't believe Arden's blood sugar is 88. I'm like super happy. It's like she's at college. She just ate something terrible. I'm assuming a while ago, because I see a bolus about 45 minutes ago, and she did a great job with it. So anyway, I'm sorry.
No, that's good. I mean, and it is true. Like a lot of it is this education piece, and when you are able and ready to access and apply that is also part of your journey.
Yeah. You have a note here too, I don't want to miss, about setting a timer. Like,
So the timer, we talked about like setting the timer in terms of during the day. The topic is, the nighttime sleep disturbances and the fear of your child going low or having long-term high. And that if you're watching the numbers all day long, it's hard to tell your brain to turn it off when you're going to bed. And so to practice giving yourself that break during the day. So setting a timer, like what you were just saying with the alarms, don't look at the number at the CGM or test your child's blood sugar for 5 minutes.
It's very worth highlighting. Like, I'll set a timer and I will not think about this until the timer goes off again. You can teach yourself to like, I know it works because before all this technology, I used to think I have to check Arden in an hour. And I seriously believe it or not, eventually my brain knew an hour.
Yeah.
Like I would just be like, oh, I'm going to test her now. And then my alarm would go off. Taught my brain how long an hour was without looking at a clock. And so you can teach yourself to, to step back a little bit too. I think that's like a really valuable idea to give yourself a shot at separation from the whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then hopefully that gives you feedback as to what's going on to then apply that at night also.
Yep.
Right. So what we're trying to do is to want to help you have more sleep at night ultimately. But it's a hard process to get there. And it is normal to have that, right? To have those sleep disturbances. But we hope that eventually to get to a place where you can trust what's in place so that you can take care of yourself and get some sleep.
Yeah, because it is very hard to see what a lack of sleep is doing to you until it's too late and you're having those fights and those problems that you were talking about. And sleep's just not a thing. You can't bank it. Like, you know what I mean? Like I can't just sleep 20 hours today and be okay tomorrow. You need to sleep every day. And I know that's a thing everyone must know, but it's tough. Like it really is. It's the thing that's come the closest to killing me from diabetes so far. Like seriously, like vibrating, heart pounding, like I'm so tired, but I can't go to sleep. Like sometimes it goes on for days when you don't know what you're doing.
Yes.
You know? Oh, it's hard. It's the worst. And I was lucky enough to be a stay-at-home dad. Like some of you poor bastards are getting up in the morning and dragging your ass to work, like on no sleep. And then listen, we had a parenting thing the other day here. And I said to my wife at the end of the day, you know how lucky we are that we even work out of our house? I was like, this took a lot of effort and time and focus that I think if we were just leaving the house and going to work, we would not have been able to accomplish this. Like, and just imagine being, having that implication and being exhausted on top of all the other things. Did we get through? There's a little bit left here. Go ahead.
Well, I think we got through everything. I think I wanted to end with a little exercise just because these first three, well, they're all challenging and heavy because what you're doing as a caregiver is challenging, but just wanted to end with a self-compassion exercise because a lot of these things that we've talked about, if shame or guilt or fear is driving some of these behaviors, to offer some self-compassion and kindness to yourself. And I can't remember if we've already gone through this before, but if you're able to either right now or maybe later, pausing and taking some deep breaths and either placing your hand over your heart and feeling your heart beat, or placing your hand over the other hand, and you can either just hold it or tap it or kind of rub it as if you were kind of caressing your child's hand, but you're doing this to yourself. And connecting with your body in that way, with either your hand over your heart or your one hand over the other, and offering a positive kind of affirmation to yourself that I am good enough. I am doing the best I can. I am taking this one day at a time. I am on a journey. And I am valuable. Whatever else is coming up for you, I know this might feel odd doing this right now, but if you are able to integrate it, you can do it for 30 seconds or a minute throughout the day of just pausing, connecting with your body and connecting with your mind and giving yourself some positive affirmation because you all are doing an incredible job.
I hope you're happy, Erika. Now there's a bunch of people crying in their cars and while they're doing their dishes. So, but no, that's fantastic. I'll try that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I appreciate
All
this
right,
very
you're
much.
Welcome.
The conversation you just enjoyed was sponsored by Omnipod 5. You want to get an Omnipod 5? You can. You want to make me happy? Do it with my link, omnipod.com/juicebox. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, AG1. Drink AG1.com/juicebox. You can start your day the same way I do, with a delicious drink of AG1. Are you starting to see patterns, but you can't quite make sense of them? You're like, oh, if I bolus here, this happens, but I don't know what to do. Should I put in a little less, a little more? If you're starting to have those thoughts, if you're starting to think, this isn't going the way the doctor said it would. I think I see something here, but I can't be sure. Once you're having those thoughts, you're ready for the Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast. It begins at episode 1000. You can also find it at juiceboxpodcast.com up in the menu. And you can find a list in the private Facebook group. Just check right under the featured tab at the top. It'll show you lists of a ton of stuff, including the Pro Tip series, which runs from episode 1000 to 1025. When or if you need something that is represented by one of the sponsors, it would help the podcast immensely if you would use my links to look into it or to make a purchase. Those links are available in the show notes of the podcast or audio player you're listening in right now and at juiceboxpodcast.com. It's a simple and easy way to support the podcast. If you're not already subscribed or following in your favorite audio app, please take the time now to do that. It really helps the show. And get those automatic downloads set up so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.